Hello there, my name's Tess King, and I'd like to have a discussion about Ambisonics. Ambisonics. You might be thinking AMBI, amphibian. You would be wrong. Ambisonics is a type of surround sound that I've been really getting into over quarantine. For assessment task reasons, because I am doing university, but hey, when you're having fun with it, it's still a fun time. And I'd just like to talk about, one, how really incredible it is, but two, some of the processes that I've learned, some methods that work for me that I've been really excited about and really interested in sharing in some way. We probably won't cover hugely any of the basic principles of Ambisonics, but there may be some dotted here and there. But feel free, go look it up, learn from experts, because I am certainly by no means an expert. Again, I started learning this stuff this year. Not a whole lot of time to become a master at something. So please learn from someone who knows far better than I do and probably has some experience in educating people. That'd probably be for the best. So maybe just a quick rundown of what Ambisonics is. It's a type of surround sound. Generally there's the real surround sound and the virtual surround sound. You might be asking, how in the hell do you have virtual surround sound? Very valid question. Essentially, the difference is that real refers to a discrete number of speaker sets. So say that you might have your own home studio that has 5.1, 7.1, maybe you're fancy and have 9.1 surround sound. I don't know. But generally that's considered a real surround sound because the composer or the mixing engineer will sit down and go, okay, this is going to be played on a speaker set with this amount of speakers in this configuration, and I'm going to use something called VBAP, which is vector-based amplitude panning, fancy, in order to determine where things will be located when they are played. It's pretty simple. It's just percentage of volume into each speaker. When you're putting 100% into two speakers at a certain distance and configuration, then you'll get a phantom image in the middle caused by your brain doing some real fancy stuff with HRTF functions, head-related transfer functions. That's really cool. You should look it up. Ambisonics, on the other hand, is virtual surround, which means that instead of having a discrete number of speakers that you're talking about, you start off by converting normal sounds into something that can be translated along a sphere. It's a very complicated maths process that I do not know very much about, but it is incredibly cool in that with a sphere, as you can imagine, there's an infinite number of possibilities of points. There's an infinite number of speakers, you could say. There are so many of them, it is so infinite that it becomes a surface rather than pinpoints of speakers. That's really gonna be a problem, isn't it? Oh no. Now we have a surface around a sphere that we can sort of glide our sounds across. I think that having a really strong conceptual model, visualization tools are really important with something like ambisonic surround sound because they enforce your listening experience, and even more so they enforce your compositional experience and how you listen intently for where things are and how they play out together. So for that, one of my famed analogies, imagine you're a human, which you probably are. Now you are encapsulated in a hamster ball, one of the rolly ones. Now instead of being fully encapsulated, it is just your head that is inside the hamster ball. This may cause some issues. Something, say wallpaper, is tacked to the inside of the hamster ball, which means that now as soon as the hamster ball rolls, you're seeing a slight shift in the wallpaper. Let's say it's like a landscape wallpaper. You're seeing a slight shift in the landscape as the ball rotates, changing your perspective of it as you move and as the landscape moves around you. There's a lot of rotation things happening. That's how I like to think of it sometimes when it's really taxing on me to fully imagine this kind of spherical landscape. So the other thing about, and a valid question that you might have about virtual surround is, well, hey, It's virtual. I don't have an infinite number of speakers. How do you play it? Great question. We use different processors for that, but because I have 2 speakers, I prefer to use the simplest method of monitoring, which is to decode the sphere into something that still describes the sphere itself, but with a little bit less resolution. In this case, we're decoding it into binaural, which is headphone land. You can play and listen to binaural on headphones and earphones, preferably not speakers because it just sounds a little nasty. It's all good. So say that whenever I put on these headphones, take it as a signal for you to put on headphones, so then you can properly listen to the binaural experience. So I will be showing you a session of mine that I have set up and just taking you some fun little creative processes. Here's one I prepared earlier. Isn't it pretty? It does look a little bit like Visual Vomit. So within this particular process, you have channels, 16 tracks, all that kind of thing, putting multi-encoders on them. I will put a link in the description for IEM plugins. They are all free. They are amazing. Sometimes Reaper doesn't like it when I have like 54 channels that all have intense automation with the multi-encoder, but it's okay. It's not IEM's fault. Things are moving about. How cool is that? What's even cooler is this little thing. So let's play that same section again. So what that is doing is the exact same process that you would be doing by scrolling around on the 360 video that I put up. This is why I think the conceptual models are really, really important as part of the process, is because you're working with 3 knobs to try and monitor a user experience of a 360 video. It's so important to have a grasp of, all right, this is roughly how things work. I can visualize this and it can make a small amount of sense. But from a compositional standpoint, it is incredibly liberating in some ways to have a certain amount of constraint put on your process. In this particular instance, what I learned is that instead of a usual stereo process where you have a lot of pre-production going into things as well as potentially some post-production stuff, and mainly the mixing process is sort of a scatter of everything. You're doing you might be fixing things, as unfortunate as that might be, but you're also adding in a lot of different character through different techniques and different areas of sound manipulation. Whereas in this context, kind of doing that thing, but there's a main goal. There's a centralized goal, which is purely spatialization. I found it incredibly useful to split up a creative process in Ambisonics into pre-production, mostly a little bit of composition, some sound design elements, some more of like a stereotypical mixing process, and then moving it into an Ambisonics process where the sole focus is on spatialization. It's been really, really useful. And you also have a clarity about what you're doing. So that's part of its constrictions, is that you are working with 16 channels, and not every plugin is going to be able to do 16 channels. It's far easier, in my opinion, to sort of get every sort of sound up to the same level of production and then bring it into Ambisonics. This doesn't mean that you're locked into whatever you made as soon as you enter into Ambisonics. No, by all means no. You can go back and you can do things, or you can do the incredibly fun thing of recording into Ambisonics by just putting the plugins on prior to recording, which is very, very fun if your computer can handle it. you have more of an opportunity to not fall into pit traps of conventional mixing. What I'm doing to change your perception of spatialization is, so what I'm doing in these automation tactics is to centralize or to focus in on kinds of spatialization. So you can see here, you don't have to listen, but you can see in this multi-EQ, I'm passing down here, and then it brings back up in another section. And then if we look at the multi-encoder and what it's doing at the same time, pulling down, and then that's a more extreme example of what's happening, but I'm using the multi-EQ to add emphasis on the motion of things. So that's what all of these processes are designed to do. These processes are designed to convince you, which again is the main point. I am trying to convince you that these motions are real, in a sense of the word. The motions that are occurring aren't just me floating this little panna thing going, you know. You get natural responses. You'll get, I can do more in-depth things such as adding on different reverbs to then bring in ever so slightly as it moves further away from you, giving the impression that there's a space in which everything exists and the motion itself makes sense. In the end, I think having a strong comprehension of fundamental principles is a lot of what you need to get going, to do anything, is just having that kind of strong base. And then even as I say that, doing something can give you a strong fundamental base of principles, can give you an even greater understanding of how a thing works. Not necessarily the technical aspect as to how it works, although you can figure that out for yourself. Even the conceptual model as to how something works. Doing this kind of thing changes your perception of everything that you do. So I highly recommend that you look at Ambisonics. Learn from people who know far more about it than I do and can probably explain it in far less time than I do, because I go too far with my analogies and talk like I'm doing right now. It's good. But that's all for today. Think, be wise, be kind, and I'll see you next time.